My name is Jerm. This is Germ Warfare, the battle of ideas.
I'm Roche. Just been a few days, but thank you for joining me in the trenches again.
It's Suidlanders' pleasure, Jeremy. We are always happy to deal with you.
To deal with me? It sounds very mafia. Gonna deal with you.
Conversations, and you're a good guy, man.
Well, look, so the last conversation we had was about the Soweto uprising, aka Youth Day, 16 June, public holiday here in South Africa, and it got quite a lot more reaction than I expected, which means that there is a lot of interest in it. I thought it would be good for you and I to continue the discussion to some degree around not just Youth Day, but also I think apartheid as a whole. There seems to be a lot of emotion when this topic is brought up. And I mean, it's weird. It's, 30 years ago now?
Apartheid, the end of apartheid, yes. 32 years ago.
Yeah. And yet, it's still a difficult topic for many.
Yes, but I think, Jeremy, that people lose sight of a few things. Firstly, this interview is being done through Riverside Radio in London. So, speak for an hour on a subject to take into account the audience. And I can't go into the deepest weeds of every event. You know?
No, you mean,
Jeremy,
you mean UK column. You mean UK column. The Riverside is a software.
I beg your pardon. Gee, I had that wrong all the time. UK column. The Riverside. I always thought, they've got two names. One must be like a trade name. Oh, okay.
Sorry, but go on.
Yeah. Because there's a name somewhere, Riverside FM. So it must be Riverside software for. I gave this very serious thought and research after the indignation of a number of the viewers, and after you invited me to do a follow-up. You can take this back to the Boer War. What I mean to say is, I was offended. I said that the Sharpeville massacre formed the context. 16 years later, the uprisings. I also mentioned the decolonization across Africa, and I mentioned the government imposing Afrikaans as the medium of instruction for black pupils in South Africa.
That's the one there. That's the one.
I said to you that if I had to learn algebra, Romanian, can't use your first language, English. You can't use Afrikaans. You've got to use a third language. I'd also been thrown stones at the window panes of the school, and I said it was very badly handled, and I stand by that position. But one of these guys, I phoned him yesterday, long story short, convivial conversation, and this morning he invited me to visit him at his home for the 6th time. 6 times now he's kind of said, okay, I get it. Listen, we should sit around the table and break bread and what have you. As I tried to explain to him, there's no time for me to go into what Sharpeville. I just said it was part of the context from the point of view of the black people and the international media. And the cause of Sharpeville was Topville. Pneumonia outbreaks in Topville. The cause of pneumonia outbreaks was overcrowding. The cause of overcrowding, pass system. The cause of the pass system was the mines needing lots of cheap labor. Pass system, you could say, was the hut tax, because the miners needed cheap labor. This back to the first Boer War in 1870. We don't have 16 hours to discuss these subjects, so sometimes I will just allude to something in passing, and people will be super offended. Massacre to help everybody. On the 21st of March, 1960, in a township, as the black towns were called, a township, newly built because of illnesses breaking out constantly in another township. Severe illnesses. Township, and they think, well, this is inorganic, so let's put a police station in here. Instead of the police station being there or there, let's put it right in the middle. It's a passageway out of the township to the train system and to the main road system, so that the police could check the passbooks of the black people. Black people were required to carry passbooks. And as evil as black people thought that system was, it wasn't the pure evil that it's mistaken for. I'm not saying it was great. I'm saying there was a reason for it. It was because when the British used a hut tax after winning the Second Boer War to force people who were self-reliant in rural areas to seek work. There's no respected scholar or academic who disputes that. Imposed at the behest of the mine owners. When they did that, such a flood of people from the eastern littoral of South Africa, the population of South Africa traditionally, before urbanization and mines, this, that, the next thing, when people lived wherever there was rain and wherever crops grew and wherever, very much along the east coast of South Africa, what is modern-day Mozambique, roughly speaking, Fish River. Position of the hut tax, 14 shillings in the province of KwaZulu, what is now KwaZulu-Natal, and 10 shillings elsewhere. It varied. Thousands of black laborers left that region and came up to the mines to get work, to get money. They couldn't just say, we're not part of the system. We live in rural Zululand. I've got 12 cows and 10 acres of land. I grow my own maize, blah, 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 blah. It was a very, very clever thing to do. Too well. Overcrowding and disease became a big, big problem. The government said, look, we can't just have everybody in South Africa living around the mines of the Free State goldfields and the Johannesburg Witwatersrand Vereniging, the famous PWV triangle. They did that and very offended by it. Why should only we have to have passbooks, to carry this thing with us everywhere? We should be allowed to move freely, which is perfectly understandable. Township of Sharpeville, which was only 2 years old. The station was a very efficient system, and the people got fed up with it. Go back a few weeks from the 21st of March 1960, 23rd of January 1960, 23 policemen to, what is the right word? They were looking for illegal liquor in a township behind the town of Durban on the east coast of South Africa. I used to live in the last white street before that township. Across the street began the township, so I know it very well. It's called Cato Manor. I'll think of the road's name I'll think of it in a minute. In the very last house of the very last road, overlooking that township. The Zulus were brewing a liquor called Gavin. You don't have 19 hours to discuss all of the niceties, so if I offend somebody here or there, I'm just trying to keep it simple. Is if you think along the lines of sugar cane and rusty nails, or sugar cane and battery acid, it's an evil drink, but it's cheap and easy to produce in a province which had then the 3 largest sugar terminals in the world. There's sugarcane everywhere. Get a hold of cheap activant with it, and you've got a drink, but it's bad for you. It famously gives you very red lips, gives hangovers that, are very mentally destructive. The Zulu women, the Nguni women, I'm not referring to Nguni as a subset of Bantu, I'm referring to Nguni as a clan, sub-tribe of the Zulu. The Nguni women who were famous for brewing it got fed up. The police coming, taking their stuff away, and there was a fracas. And to cut a long story short, it turned into a mob violence thing, and 9 of the 23 policemen were butchered very, very badly. They were, in many cases, disemboweled before death. Hanging in the air, this febrile thing among the police. For a few weeks to the 21st of March, 2 months roughly, to the 21st of March, and between 5 and 20,000 people entered the police at this police station in Sharpeville. Police opened fire. Sorry, I'm laughing. I know it's not a funny subject, but some of the statistics are, they fired, depending upon whom you believe, the official records or unofficial records, somewhere between 1,344 and 1,552 rounds in well under 5 minutes. Those rounds were Sten gun rounds, automatic submachine guns from World War II in Korea. Massacre. Figures vary. What I would suggest is the most figure and middle ground figure is something like 90 people were shot dead and something like 230, 40, 50 wounded. Massacre. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done the same thing. I heard about my colleagues in Durban disemboweled 3 19-year-old white constables. So naturally you have sympathy for your people, your culture, this is normal. So there were 4 white guys killed, black policemen. 3 of the 4 white guys were 19-year-old little boys. As I have a 25 and a 23-year-old and a 16-year-old son. So I know that age. They're boys, man. Literally, these policemen in Sharpeville were petrified, taking no chances. Government sent, there were, I think, 50 policemen, 30 or 50, and then they sent another 130 to assist them. They held them off for a while, said, don't worry, somebody's coming to address your grievances, just be patient. These police backup guys, and it was a massacre. You may be sympathetic to the police. You may be sympathetic to the people who were objecting to the pass laws. What I was saying is that 16 years later, they have thought, context of the brow, the fevered atmosphere in South Africa. Wisdom would have been applied to the matter, just a dose. I thought about this, and I was speaking to somebody about it, and I said to them, when I turned my mind to the matter, I didn't even have to apply it. The solution was clear to me without thinking about it. Within 3 seconds, the whole 5-step process was apparent to me. It doesn't require a brain surgeon. You do. As you say, guys, if any situation like this ever arises again, they knew, by the way, in Soweto there was going to be this children's march. Very well known. They have intelligence sources, the whole lot. The team on standby, 3 teams. 16mm, I don't know in 1976 what the technology was, 8mm or 16mm with cameras. You just fend off send them with you within 20 minutes, but an hour for the sake of caution. Film everything. As many warnings as you can. Fire tear gas for 1 full day. Day full. Number 2, use water cannons. Number 3, use rubber bullets. Afternoon only of day number 4, use hard point ammunition. Afterwards, we can say, see how hard we try with these people? Try our best, instead of giving away all of the high ground in one fell swoop. Remember the oil sellers embargo. There wasn't an oil embargo on South Africa as such, but there was an oil sellers embargo, so much so. You see how all of this stuff is interconnected, and people don't stop to think about it. Venue, a live events venue in Johannesburg called Summer Place. The South African, well, not half, but a bunch of people who watch this video will know Summer Place. Summer Place was the summer home of Adnan Khashoggi, the Iranian oil smuggler. The Iranian Revolution was a blessing for South Africa because in 1979 it summarily became a pariah state. We had struggled, there was first of all the 1973 Arab oil embargo and OPEC, and then there was the oil shock, and we went through a very rough patch of sanctions and all sorts of things over that period of time. Along comes 1979, a Shia Muslim state is founded. First thing we do is send a delegation there to secure oil. The Iranis say, oh, manna from heaven. We say, yes, manna from heaven, you. Say, here's our man Adnan. Sort you out. And so we've circumvented this unofficial oil embargo, the oil sellers embargo. Come again to a place I know, a single boy mooring, a boy in the sea as big as this house, and it's not my house, I live in an enormous grace and favor house in the Bamboo Mountains. But because I've been there, built a kayak from Toti Main Beach all the way up the coast and out around the single buoy mooring and around a tanker that was discharging Irani oil there. Khashoggi built this house, could spend lots of time in Johannesburg. It was a whole big thing. What I'm saying is we didn't need to have so many of these crises. The French had a contract to supply arms to South Africa, which they terminated in 1977, when the United Nations had a voluntary arms sales embargo imposed from the 60s. In 1977, they ratified it as a mandatory thing. Immediately cancelled the contracts with South Africa. All of those dramas that the apartheid society went through precipitated, you only have to look at the timeline. It doesn't think image of a 10-year-old killed, carried by an older boy, taken clandestinely by a black photographer for the World newspaper, and became, distributed throughout the entire world, so that the black photographer couldn't take the fame, and he immediately retired and went and lived in a little village, where the village was located, and spent the rest of his life just living in the village as a traditional African man. I watched an interview with him. A little bit of, and they could have turned the tables. The 1970s was a totally different era. As sexual morality was different, church morality was different, Ordinary social mores were different. The language you could use in front of a woman was different. You still had at country clubs ladies' bars. At the country club, you would go into a bar, you had to have a jacket and a tie and so on, and long pants. But in the ladies' bar, you couldn't take your jacket off. You weren't allowed to use strong language. In some of them, they wouldn't serve hard liquor. It was a totally different. The whole world was a very, very different place. If we'd said, you see, we did everything we can. It doesn't matter how hard we try. Been possibly difficult. Vince, our most powerful allies abandon us at the United Nations. Middle America, Britain, Middle France, put their foots down. They've said to their governments in this ever so much more conservative, weren't they, have no idea the difference then and now. For all intents and purposes, okay, I suppose in some circles or whatever, no pornography, none. In South Africa, 0 gambling allowed. Illegal, end of story. Abortion, illegal, end of story. Different epoch. Very easy to garner support and throw the whole lot out the window. And I'll finish. I know I've been speaking for long now. This might be one of the things that made people upset. Jimmy Kruger, the death of Steve Biko, his custody in Pretoria from severe brain trauma as a result of being smashed over the head for days on end. Leaves me cold. Said, Jimmy, you dunce, you damned fool. Be how you feel. He's going to land us in a world of trouble. I'm going to say, to win the argument, these barbarians. No, and this is what I'm trying to convey. I don't in every scenario know everything. When I speak to people in Britain, knowing that that's the audience, yeah, you later put it on YouTube and what have you, but the core audience, I have to to speak to people who don't know about a subject as well as I can. It doesn't involve saying, well, the weed comes from, and it's deep underground, for 59 of the 60 minutes. I have to say, there are weeds in the garden. It's a problem. We need to get weed killer. Sadly, that's real life in the real world. Stephen Biko might have been in the world. He might have been funded by the Chinese and controlled by the Russians. As you alluded in our previous interview, you were dead right, but I didn't want to get onto that track because experience, we have a tendency, we as conservatives, to say that everything is everybody else's fault. The gays, the Jews, the English, the Americans, the Soviets, the communists, it's never our fault. Just saying. I disagree with the idea that Kruger, okay in telling the world, nah, black man dead, I don't care. I think that we handled the 16th of June uprisings, or not the 16th, the uprisings were subsequent. The initial school children's march, very badly. At no point did I say that Sharpeville, same category. I would have done the same thing. If it is true, as many as 20,000 people surrounded that police station. It's true, which it is. 9 policemen were disemboweled before they died, manner, while looking for Gavin, which is a legitimately evil liquor. I would have said, he walked in with a Sten gun. This bolt action rifle, give me the Sten gun. You 100 Rand or whatever the case may be, because I would have been wetting my pants with terror. All for just carrying out the inspection of passbooks. Imposed. I'm not saying if you were a black person, you should have been pleased with passbooks. I am saying there was a reason. And enteric fever outbreaks, constant consumption, tuberculosis worsening and worsening and worsening and worsening because of hundreds of thousands of people coming to seek labor, behest of the mine owners, to be controlled. Don't like it. The policemen had to enforce that law. 20,000 people, 8 weeks after the events in Cato Manor, surrounded that police station. Those policemen must have been terrified. I would have said, morality, no morality. I don't want to be disemboweled today. Thank you. Give me the automatic weapon. This is human. Humans think like that. Human beings. It's a human being's reaction. I make no apology for it. But I would say that Jimmy Kruger could have used a little bit more acumen, more wisdom. He handled the Steve Biko death, and I think that the apartheid government shot itself, as my brother said to me the other day. He was talking about something that somebody did that was catastrophically stupid. He said he didn't just shoot himself in the foot. For good measure, he shot himself in the head too. And we did that. And we know that we did that because of the UN resolution becoming mandatory in 1977, the French cancelling the contracts, and us saying we panicked. We were terrified as a country. How are we going to fend off the communism coming down from the north? Don't have bullets and guns and corvettes and Mirage aircraft and Super Freelon helicopters and Panhard Lavoisier armored cars and Saracens and what have you. And we had to frantically put together an arms industry in South Africa, which we ended up doing very well. But people overlook the fact that for about 10 years solid, were stricken about the advance of communism down and not having weapons to defend ourselves against what we perceived to be the millions upon millions upon millions of black people being sponsored by communism. I'll leave one last anecdote. Sorry, Jeremy. Sorry. I apologize to you. Operation was funded by either the USA or the United Nations. It was the exercise at the end of apartheid where the outside the goodwill people said, we will pay for the ANC and the South African apartheid system to destroy a lot of their weapons. Let's, as it were, throw the weapons into the sea. Let us turn into plowshares. I'm getting muddled up now. And spears into pruning hooks. And warfare into goodness and mercy and love and what have you. ANC intelligence, Ronnie Casserols, boasted that just in Operation Vula, Vula means open in Zulu, he bragged that he oversaw the transport of over 2 million AK-47 rifles alone. One operation, one instrument of warfare. False cavities, overland tourist trucks. Those tourist trucks intimately well. Early a case of 2 or 3 or 4 females, continental Europe, or the USA or Canada, feeling a bit insecure traveling through Africa, but dying to see the cheetahs and the leopards and the Great Rift Valley and what have you. So they come together in a group of 30, they feel safer, and they travel on an overland truck from wherever. It can be as far north as Scotland, or it can begin in Egypt, or it can begin just in Ethiopia beneath the Sudan civil war zone, and they travel all the way to Cape Town. Through that means alone, Ronnie Castle's bragged 2 million AK-47 rifles. So you can imagine the number of rifles in South Africa, 10 million, whatever, that were destroyed in Operation Mouflon. I'm talking about ANC weapons. 1,000. 2 100,000. They kept all of those weapons. So nobody has to convince me about the communists and the Soviets and the threats and I'm not, but sometimes, to be wise, sometimes it's better to look left and right and left again before you cross the road. That's all.
One of the misconceptions that comes out in every conversation about not just the Soweto uprising, but apartheid as a whole, is that it was an Afrikaner invention. It was and it wasn't. This is something that is always left out. The machinery, the foundation, actually came from the British. I mean, Cecil Rhodes and the Glenn Grey Act of 1894, when he effectively segregated black people. That was already way before apartheid even began.
Yeah. Jeremy,
and then Milner himself added to it. I mean, the concentration camps.
Yeah.
Which had, I mean, they had obviously 20, I think it was like 25 or 26,000 Boers and over 100,000 blacks.
I go with Swat's number because he has done the best job by far of an academic assessment of these things. So I will go with the number 36,000, but who died. But it's not that different to you. It's not like we're talking chalk and cheese. It's a complete fiction. There was a modus vivendi that had been established over centuries between the Afrikaners and the blacks. Laws weren't needed. You're over there, we're over here. Don't come and meddle in our affairs, and we'll leave you to your business. We'll leave you to your customs and your ways and your what have you. But when diamonds and then gold were discovered in South Africa in the 1860s and the 1880s, the British were frantic to steal it all. I mean, the First Boer War began in 1870 for all practical intents and purposes. Which were beaten off, and lo and behold, they came back with the biggest force ever assembled, and they won through concentration camps in 1899, 10th of October, 1899. To 1902, depending how you want to count it. They engaged in the consolidation of South Africa into one entity. Previously, you'd had the Cape as a British colony, and Transvaal and Free State as Boer republics. So now we make one country, have one set of laws, blah, blah, blah. Mines are taken after 1902. They weren't given to Afrikaners, they weren't given to British subjects, they weren't given to English-speaking South Africans, they weren't given to the blacks, the coloureds, that is to say the mixed-race people of South Africa who insist upon being called coloured. They weren't given to the Indians. They were given to another ethnic group altogether. And those people were sitting on, or had control of, the largest lode, L-O-D-E, lode of wealth in the history of the world. To maximize their profits, and they demanded cheap labor. And so it was that, although you are right about the Glenn Grey Act, you are dead right, you're spot on. But it was then, between 1902 and 1910, you could draw it out a little bit more if you like, that they fashioned a system that wasn't about modus vivendi. It wasn't about you go your way, I'll go mine, and let's keep out of one another's hair. About ensuring lots and lots of people that came to live cheek by jowl. The people who didn't really want them there, but they were demanded to be there by the mine owners. 4, you had to have a system of apartheid The name apartheid it means apartness in Afrikaans. To that system much later. It wasn't apartheid, it was the British who said, blacks shall not ride on this train, and if they do ride on this train, they must be in the carriages right at the end, and there must be a separation between so that you can't pass from black carriages to white carriages, and blacks should stand at one end of the railway platform and whites at the other. Blacks may not use the same bridge over the railway tracks to get to the thing, blah, 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 blah. So yes, you're correct, Jeremy. It was not an Afrikaner invention. Simply just wasn't.
But the big thing here is that they did keep it going. And this is one of the reasons why our previous conversation, I think, got a lot of heat from many of those. I won't say Afrikaners in general. I think a very small vocal type of Afrikaner that can't see the apartheid government doing anything wrong. And the apartheid government clearly did do things wrong. They weren't perfect. And basically, they take offense when you criticize the apartheid government. But the reality is that they deserve criticism because they were not morally superior. They made a lot of errors of judgment. And it was not a sustainable system, Simon.
Not a sustainable system. The explosion in population, it frustrates me that people choose to apply their minds to practical reality. I'm sorry to say this, but this is well recorded in the book, the audio book, the narration, The Day of the Dead Moon, which in my opinion is one of the 2 or 3 finest works, bar none, about South Africa. By David Rattray, who was subsequently murdered. Royal Artillery officer recorded the Mfetane, the Great Crushing of the early 1830s, where the blacks slaughtered one another, every tribe against every tribe. This was before the Great Trek, so it had nothing to do with white people competing for black resources. That's false. The Great Trek only began in 1836, and in those ox wagons, getting to Natal took you until the 1840s. Any meaningful numbers over the Drakensberg Mountains, I should say, for your British audience. His words were, diary, 1/3 and 2/3 of the people were slaughtered, and I am inclined to the latter number. And I have seen liberal sources give much lower numbers. My opinion is that the population at the beginning of the Great Crushing, the Mfetane, the black population, was about 3 million. That at the end of the Great Crushing in the 1830s, the population of South Africa was, black population, South population was negligible. It was 1.5 million. Let's say it was 2 million. The population of black South Africa today, our census statistics are abominable. Having looked at this matter very closely, that it somewhere like 60 million black African people. But let's make it 50 million. Go from 1 million to 50 million years. 100 and whatever, 60 years. No, Simon, 190 years. To have the greatest population explosion in history. There's no other way to achieve that. No way that a tiny white population was forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever going to keep that thing at bay. Been a little bit long-winded now, but It's time for us to maybe speak about facts, figures, data, statistics, mathematics, arithmetic. The idea that apartheid could continue forever is a fallacy. And yes, mistakes were made on the way, and everybody makes mistakes. So I tend to turn a blind eye to them. Try not to criticize and be too judgmental, but just a mistake. That was a catastrophic blunder. I'm talking now about the 16th of June, not about Sharpeville. Because I tell you what, if 5,000 people were surrounding me, I'd bring out a Browning machine gun meter with one of those belts, a million rounds or whatever. A job for checking your passport because the government told me to do so, because there's a population explosion like the world has never seen in the province of the Transvaal, because the government has forced people to leave Natal by putting a tax on their huts, cannot pay because they don't have jobs, they're pastoralists, they're herders, they are completely 100% self-sufficient, so they have no way of getting an income, so they have to get an income, which means that they have to go and work on the gold mines. That's not my fault as a policeman. Go away, do what, but it's not me. I think, it's not that I deal with conservatives, many of whom are very pro-apartheid. So I try not to get involved in these conversations because it just leads to arguments. But objectively speaking.
Yeah, sorry for jumping in, but I think there is a difference here in what apartheid was and what perhaps Hendrik Verwoerd wanted it to be. And this is often buried. But, I mean, as far as I can tell, he did not want what apartheid became. He wanted separate states that were neighbors. And that would have been very different to what we ended up with. Because then there wouldn't have been apartheid.
Yeah. Ethno states. Yes, if I was in charge, that's what I would have done. And I can never understand why it wasn't done. But I think that the process was subverted by the internationalists. Yes. He was assassinated on the day that he was due to give a speech rescinding the tax exemption of the gold miners. He came into power and he says, what's this business that the wealthiest companies in the whole world pay the least tax? He was going to rescind the 10% company tax, special, whatever you call it. There's no doubt in my mind. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And when there's a lot of smoke, there's probably a lot of fire. And when you can, eventually you have to arrive at the conclusion that South Africa was led by the nose international community for a long, long time. As we had the Soviets break South Africa, so too we had internationalists within South Africa subverting what could have been a very successful thing. Ethno states at the southern tip of Africa. It happened that way.
And it was actually the British Empire that created the foundation for apartheid, for the past laws that you were talking about earlier, for the concentration camps, for the segregation, etc., etc. But that is always suppressed.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, it was in the period after the Second World War. The government was the British government. They were governing through their preferred proxies in this country. There was very little Afrikaner representation until 1948, and we only got independence on the 31st of May, 1960. So it was British through and through for that 58, you count it however you like, 46 to 58 year period from 1902. Although power over the Cape and the province of, it was then called Natal, it's now called KwaZulu-Natal, 100 and more years before that. I'm exaggerating now. Call it 1805 in the Cape. You know, the Napoleonic Wars is a very complicated period. From 1795 to about 1806 is like trying to decipher a bowl of spaghetti. No, it was British through and through.
And just to add to that, I mean, the 1911 Mines Act, that was established by the British, right? And that effectively created the color bar that put whites in a particular segment and blacks in a particular segment of the labor force. The Natives Land Act, this is the famous one, the big one of 1913, which officially prohibited blacks from buying land, right? That was also implemented by the British. That was 30.
It was entirely a British invention.
That was,
there was,
what is that, 35 years before apartheid.
I can't really say that apartheid began in 1948. I mean, Verwoerd was in the 60s. If you want to use the word apartheid for apartheid, you either have to say began in the 1960s, or you have to say it began immediately after the Second Anglo-Boer War, when the British passed a series of laws, find these things which were later molded and refined and chopped up and changed and what have you. But the entire, as you used the correct word earlier, Jeremy, entire foundation for the apartheid structure was British through and through. There were no other participants in it. Didn't define it. The colours didn't define it. The Indians of South Africa didn't define it. And the Afrikaners didn't define it. It was British colonial authorities functioning for the most part through English white South Africa. Yeah, there were some
Anglo.
Afrikaners here and there, but that's not, it's to miss the point entirely. If 5%, let's say workforce, let's say I have 100 people working for me, 95% of them are, let's say, Zulus. 5% of them are Bushmen. To say, oh, well, golly gee, we all had a hand in it is completely misleading. British colonial authorities who built the foundation of apartheid, all of it. English-speaking white South Africa, their preferred guise. Places like notably the Orange Free State, English-speaking whites were so underrepresented that they were the British were effectively functioning through some Afrikaners, but it was by no stretch of the imagination the invention of the Afrikaner mind. That's a fiction.
And had Hendrik Verwoerd's idea actually played out, well, the country we live in now would look very, very different, without a doubt. And there wouldn't have been apartheid, and there might have been a very different structure of society today.
Always had a soft spot for your viewers who don't know this. This very famous, highly intellectual, intelligent Prime Minister of South Africa. We had the prime ministerial system after full independence. In fact, before too, but we did then get a state president. It wasn't the Queen who was our paramount. He invented a system whereby in 3 of the 4 provinces of South Africa, you could argue 4 of the 4, they set up independent little homelands. The one for the Zulus, the Xhosa people, and one sort of extended one for the Tswana people. It was called Boputa Tswana, and then there were others to Venda, and so on. The Boputa Tswana experiment was the most successful of the lot. I remember going to Boputa Tswana. I come from a completely different region of the country, but I think I first visited Boputa Tswana before the end of the apartheid or shortly after it. And I remember admiring how nicely it had done. It really did nicely. I think that we should have done a better job of I don't know, but trying to see if that experiment work. I don't know. I think I'm sympathetic to you. But one thing that's certain, apartheid couldn't work forever, and was a word that was used to apply, that was used to describe them as an extension of something that whose foundations had been laid, totally different people. Say the British people, the British colonial authorities, and decades previously.
And it's a very nuanced conversation, but South Africa today is in many ways worse than what it was during the apartheid era.
No two ways about it. If any of your viewers doubt what you're saying, they can search on social media. A condition of Johannesburg CBD today. When
It's a dump.
you say, yeah. When you say worse, it's like in some aspects 95% worse. The condition of Johannesburg is maybe 99% worse than it was. The of education across South Africa is, I don't know what the number is. I haven't done a scholarly study of the thing using original sources, but it might be 75% worse. The condition of healthcare in South Africa, state healthcare in South Africa, is probably 90 to 95 to 97% worse. Of the roads in South Africa is 50 to 60% worse. Condition of administration, the process of going into an awful government building to go through an administrative exercise is, it's horrible.
No dams.
Everything is deteriorated. There's not.
No dams have been built.
There has been not one single improvement to South Africa. And I can say that to the liberals who say to me, RDP. There was a program called the Reconstruction and Development Program. And it was meant to be the ANC's flagship project, whereby they would, whites. I'm going to show you. We and our liberal friends. 2007, 8. I was the projects manager of the famous ANC elective conference in the town of Polokwane, in which one president was booted out and another president came in. So they're selecting their guy for the next elections. And they recalled President Thabo Mbeki and they put President Jacob Zuma in. They had the main vote. They chased everybody out, journalists, cameramen, blah, 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 blah. And they went through about a 2-hour process of ensuring that every camera that couldn't be moved, big television cameras, had been turned off, and they inspected the credentials of every single human being. They threw out all of the security. They placed them outside rather than inside. They cleared the backstage area. They chased out but got rid of all of my crew. 5 of us were allowed to remain. A guy called Mubi Mabazo, who comes from my home area, and 3 sound and audio-visual technicians, because they couldn't run the thing without us. That they erupted a protest kind of a thing. Delegates of the African National Congress, this is the cream of the crop of the sainted African National Congress, started smashing all of our gear. microphones, tables, the voting systems, automated voting system. They caused many millions of rand of damage. It just destroyed everything. I said to Mubi Mabazo, who I knew very well and who was an ANC activist prior to becoming a lighting technician, what is going on here? Simon, this is because they built us better schools and clinics and houses than the ANC has done so far. And people are furious with the failure of Nelson Mandela and his successor.
Even Julius Malema
Doesn't
said
tell
that.
you everything you need to know. Well, then I don't know.
But even Julius Malema said that.
It's a dog show. South Africa is an absolute shambles. It's shambolic. It's in the true sense of the word. A shambles. The original meaning of the word was an abattoir. It's just an orgy of blood and guts and snot and teeth and
people don't understand that it's very, very dangerous living in South Africa. I don't know if where you are, if it's the same. In Cape Town or in Johannesburg, women can't drive alone at night, for example, or even walk.
Jeremy. Offended. No.
And yes, the other thing, right? I think it was 2023. We had an average of 8 hours per day of no electricity.
Yes, that's the figure that was given, but I did some work on it at the time. I concluded that it was 12 hours a day that we were being bull-dusted because I was toting up all the figures. I was on one of those apps that says how much is it out here and what is the timetable over there. And over a couple of weeks process, I'm not saying I know better than you, my figures are right, your figures are wrong. They were saying 8 hours, but I kept on producing videos in which I was saying, guys, here are the numbers. 1 + 1 = 2 + 1 = 3 + 45 + 60. Bad it was that I could make a studied case, a statistical case. 12 hours a day, every single man, woman, and child on a rotational basis didn't have electricity in this country.
But hold on, I just want to clarify. It wasn't only in 2023. We've been having. Okay, so we say load shedding in South Africa, but it's rolling blackouts. That's the blackouts. Okay, we've been having blackouts since what, 2010.
2008, because when they first occurred, I remember where I was and I remember what the debate was. Because I was very heavily involved in the World Cup in 2010. So it was pertinent that I should be in circles where this debate should happen. Is South Africa capable of executing the 2010 World Cup? And one of my contacts, a very, very influential guy, told me that the United States of America had volunteered to take over the 2010 World Cup of football from South Africa because it was looking that shaky that they wouldn't be able to pull it, that we wouldn't be able to pull it off. So, I was present.
And I want to also point out, we have been speaking this entire conversation very domestically. A large amount of what we talk about has had foreign influence. And I want to emphasize that. Again, foreign influence has always been a big factor, but that's generally a separate discussion, although it's also related, but that hasn't been the focus of this discussion.
The way to understand South Africa is think of a Monopoly game. Rainy Saturday afternoon, 8 children gather, one's got the top hat, one's got the ship. 8 children gather to play Monopoly. South Africa is not, never has been, and never will be one of the 8, or let's say Monopoly could have 20 children, one of the 20 most important countries in the world. We may just be the most important non-player, the most important property in the world. To this day, the Geological Survey says that South Africa has over 50% of the world's underground gold reserves. Use 83% of the world's chromium. And in the modern world, chromium is a much more, it's in everything. You only have to look at anything that is shiny to know it. Excuse me. Use 83% of the world's chromium. We produce 43% of the world's manganese, used for hardening steel. So it's a very, very, very important metal in the modern world. Excuse me. We have uranium and we have diamonds and so on. So maybe we're not the most valuable non-player country in the in the world, but we might be. We are most certainly on that home stretch. The fourth street in the Monopoly game, because we have these tremendous world-beating resources. I've just mentioned a few. The interest of foreigners in this country is never going to go away. We also control the southern sea route. So you can imagine for yourself, Selma Cogliano, going on with shipping, a video recently, it's the best source on the Strait of Hormuz, by the way, if anybody listening is about what's happening there, is what's going on with shipping. Selma Cogliano did he's a professor, so he produces very scholarly stuff, in which he showed that over 50% of the world's west-east, east-west Africa shipping that would typically go through the Strait of Hormuz, I beg your pardon, through the Suez Canal, through the Red Sea, going around the Cape. In the event of Red Sea / Strait of Hormuz closure, ructions, drama, missiles flying overhead, we control the premier route of the entire world. So yeah, they're forever meddling. We will never not have interference in this country. We're just too valuable to the greatest interests of the world.
So the moral of the story is that if you're offended by a more nuanced / truthful perspective on Soweto uprising and all the related talking points to do with apartheid, sorry for you.
It's you can't be offended if you look at it objectively. If you're honest, there are two sides to every story. It may be, it's like a divorce. It may be the husband bashed the wife. Nelson Mandela famously, his wife secured a divorce when you could not secure a divorce in South Africa. She was able to demonstrate to the judge Nelson Mandela had beaten her unconscious, her so badly that she would be unconscious, and it happened many, many, many times. So she eventually got a divorce, his first wife. Sometimes it's that cut and dried. But there's also the instance where the husband says, Your Honor, put me in jail. It is the shame of my life that I lifted my hand to my wife. However, Your Honor, when you put me in jail, please check the CCTV camera footage first, because I beat her once, not 10 times. Surely that must count for something. Didn't make her unconscious. And by the way, here is hard proof that she slept with another man. Here is hard proof that she hasn't cooked a meal for the children in 3 months. Put me in jail, but put me in jail on the basis of what I didn't do. That's the moral of the story of these two interviews that I've done with you, these two recent ones, and the conversation I held with Peter in Johannesburg yesterday, in which he invited me 5 times, and once again this morning after he was furious. He was beyond livid. He was inviting me to have tea, Understood. That's my way of saying yes to you, Jeremy.
Okay, Simon, how can I follow you?
Suidlanders is a civil defense organization and I'm a salaried member. They pay for me to be here. Devoted to the erection of a national emergency plan in the event of a catastrophe in South Africa. If your viewers would like to donate to that, they can visit Suidlanders. You can see the spelling behind me, SUID, landers.org. Please make a donation. Otherwise, just search against my name. We're all over the internet. Thank you, Jeremy.
As always, Simon, thank you for joining me in the trenches.